What if your final days revealed a secret you were never meant to know? A man, moments from giving up, locks eyes with twin boys who carry the face of a past he tried to forget, and the bloodline he never knew existed. If stories like this captivate you, give this video a thumbs up, share where you're watching from in the comments, and smash the subscribe button. Because what happens next will change everything. The bright lights in Dr. Peterson's office buzzed loudly as Evans Keating stared at the X-ray pictures on the wall. Black and white images that told him he was going to die very soon. 6 to 8 weeks, Dr. Peterson said again, his voice sounding far away. I'm sorry, Evans. The brain tumor is growing fast. We can talk about ways to make you comfortable. But Evans stopped listening. The words deadly brain cancer echoed in his head as he stumbled out of the doctor's office. His expensive shoes clicked on the hospital floor like a timer counting down to 0. At 39 years old, Evans Keating owned half the buildings in downtown Chicago. His real estate business had made him richer than he ever dreamed. But money couldn't buy him more time. A man who built homes for others would never see his 40th birthday. His hands shook as he gripped the steering wheel of his Mercedes, driving through Detroit's busy evening traffic. In just a few weeks, the city would blur past him forever. He should call his assistant, cancel his meetings, get his business in order. Instead, he drove without purpose, his mind struggling to accept the impossible truth. Then he saw them, standing at the Main Street bus station. A woman with red hair held the hands of 2 identical boys. Something about the way they stood, the way they tilted their heads, made his breath catch in his throat. Evans pulled over quickly, ignoring the angry honking cars behind him. His eyes focused on the children. Twin boys, maybe 6 years old, with dark hair and familiar brown eyes. His eyes! The woman turned slightly, and Evans's world fell apart completely. Rebecca, but older now, wearing simple clothes instead of expensive dresses. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, and the name tag on her work uniform read Rebecca Johnson. Not Rebecca Martinez, the woman he had publicly destroyed 7 years ago. As the bus approached, one of the boys looked directly at Evans through his car window. The child's innocent stare cut through him like lightning, and Evans knew with absolute certainty, these were his sons. The sons he never knew existed. Evans abandoned his Mercedes at the curb and rushed toward the bus stop, his heart pounding against his chest. The evening crowd pushed past him as he fought his way through, desperate not to lose sight of them. Rebecca, he called out, his voice cracking. She froze, her grip tightening protectively on the boy's hands. When she turned, her face had gone pale as snow. The children looked up at their mother with confusion, then at the well-dressed stranger approaching them. You're wrong, Rebecca said quickly, pulling the boys closer. My name is Rebecca Johnson. I don't know you. But Evans could see the truth in her terrified eyes. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. The boy on the left had his stubborn chin, while the other shared his thick eyebrows. They were perfect copies of the Keating family features. Don't lie to me, Rebecca, Evans said, stepping closer despite her obvious fear. A sharp pain shot through his skull, making him wince. Those are my sons. Mommy, who is this man? The smaller boy whispered, hiding behind Rebecca's legs. No one important, Tommy, she replied firmly, then looked back at Evans with defiance blazing in her green eyes. You need to leave us alone now. I'm not going anywhere, Evans insisted, though another wave of pain made him lean against a nearby pillar for support. How old are they, Rebecca? That doesn't mean anything, she cut him off sharply. You made your feelings about me perfectly clear 7 years ago. These boys don't know you, and they don't need to know you. The braver twin, Danny, Evans guessed, stepped forward slightly, studying Evans with curious intensity. Are you sick, mister? You look pale. Evans knelt down slowly, fighting the dizziness that threatened to overwhelm him. I'm fine, son. What's your name? Don't answer that, Rebecca commanded, then addressed Evans with ice in her voice. If you come near my children again, I'll call the police. They have a father figure who actually cares about them. The bus roared into the station, drowning out Evans's response as Rebecca hurried the boys toward the doors. Danny looked back one more time, his innocent eyes filled with questions that pierced Evans's dying heart. That night, Evans sat in his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, his untouched whiskey reflecting the city lights. The pain in his head had gotten worse, but it was nothing compared to the agony in his chest. Those boys, Danny and Tommy, were his flesh and blood, and he'd missed 6 years of their lives. His mind drifted back to that terrible night 7 years ago. The memory was sharp as broken glass. The grand ballroom had been decorated with white roses and golden lights for their engagement party. 200 of Chicago's elite mingled in the grand room, celebrating what the newspapers called the merger of the century. Rebecca had looked beautiful in her emerald dress, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. She'd told him about the pregnancy just hours before the party. 8 weeks along, she'd whispered with tears of joy in her eyes. But then Evans's business partner, Robert, had pulled him aside with devastating news. The Henderson deal, their biggest purchase, had fallen through because someone had leaked their bid. Robert's investigation pointed to Rebecca's access to Evans's computer. "She's been playing you, Evans," Robert had said. "Classic gold digger move. Get pregnant, secure the fortune." The doubt had poisoned Evans's mind like venom. When Rebecca approached him with champagne, glowing with happiness, something dark had erupted from his chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Evans had announced, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This engagement is off." Rebecca's face had crumbled in real time. "Evans, what are you?" "I won't be manipulated by a calculating gold digger," he declared, his words echoing off the marble walls. "Someone who would seduce me for my money and then sabotage my business." The gasps and whispers had filled the air like a swarm of locusts. Rebecca had stood frozen, her hands still protectively over her stomach, tears streaming down her face as 200 witnesses watched her world collapse. 3 days later, Robert confessed. A jealous employee had leaked the information. But by then, Rebecca had vanished, along with the child she'd lost from the trauma. Evans's whiskey glass slipped from his trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor. He destroyed the woman he loved and killed his own child with his cruelty. Now, with death racing toward him, he discovered that 2 children had somehow survived his devastating mistake. For 3 days, Evans haunted the bus station like a ghost, waiting. The headaches were getting worse, accompanied by moments where his vision blurred and his hands shook uncontrollably. But he couldn't give up, not when he'd found his sons. On Thursday evening, Rebecca emerged from the station with the boys, her jaw set with determination. When she spotted him, her face hardened. "This is harassment," she said coldly, positioning herself between Evans and the children. "5 minutes," Evans pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just let me talk to them for 5 minutes." Danny peered around his mother with curious eyes while Tommy clutched her hand tighter, his small face filled with worry. "Please, Mommy," Danny whispered. He seemed sad. Rebecca's resolve wavered for a moment, then hardened again. "Fine, 5 minutes. But I stay right here, and if either of my boys feels uncomfortable, you leave immediately." Evans knelt carefully, fighting a wave of dizziness. "Hi, boys. I'm Evans. I knew your mom a long time ago. Are you the man who made Mommy cry?" Tommy asked suddenly, his voice barely audible. The innocent question hit Evans like a physical blow. He glanced at Rebecca, whose eyes were filled with old pain. "Yes," Evans admitted quietly. I hurt your mommy very badly, and I'm sorry for that. Danny stepped forward protectively. Then why should we talk to you? Mommy says people who hurt others aren't good people. Because sometimes, Evan said, struggling to find words a 6-year-old could understand. People make terrible mistakes, and sometimes they spend the rest of their lives trying to make up for those mistakes. Tommy shook his head violently. We don't need a daddy. We have mommy, and she takes care of us. Time's up, Rebecca announced, noting Evans's pale complexion and the way he gripped the bench for support. Boys, say goodbye. Goodbye, Danny said politely, but Tommy just stared at the ground. As they walked away, Evans called out desperately, I just want to know you. Please. Rebecca turned back, her expression softening slightly at his obvious desperation. Supervised visits only. 1 hour, twice a week. Lincoln Park, near the playground. Her voice grew stern. And Evans, see a doctor. You look terrible. Evans watched them disappear into the crowd, hope and despair warring in his chest. He had permission to see his sons, but time was running out faster than sand through an hourglass. Evans hired a private investigator within hours of that first supervised visit. The manila folder that arrived 3 days later contained revelations that made his terminal diagnosis seem like a minor inconvenience. Rebecca Johnson, legally changed from Rebecca Martinez, worked 3 jobs. Mornings at Detroit General Hospital as a radiology technician, afternoons cleaning offices downtown, and weekends at a local diner. Her monthly income barely covered rent for their cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where sirens wailed through the night. But the most devastating discovery came in a school report tucked deep in the file. Tommy had severe dyslexia. The recommended therapy cost $300 per week. Money Rebecca simply didn't have. The boy was falling further behind, his confidence crumbling with each failed reading attempt. Evans studied Tommy's school photo, seeing his own childhood struggles reflected in those confused brown eyes. He'd overcome his learning difficulties with expensive tutors and specialized programs. His son had no such luxury. The final revelation came when Evans followed them to the park for their second supervised visit. He arrived early, hiding behind a tree to observe them naturally. Tell us about Daddy again, Danny was saying to Rebecca as they sat on a bench. Rebecca's voice was gentle but sad. Your father was a good man who got very sick when you were babies. He went to heaven before you could meet him. Evans gripped the tree bark until his knuckles went white. She told them he was dead. In their innocent minds, they were meeting a stranger, not their father. Do you think Daddy can see us from heaven? Tommy asked, struggling to pronounce the words correctly. I'm sure he can, sweetheart. And I know he loves you both very much. The irony was suffocating. Evans was dying, but in his sons' minds, he'd been dead for 6 years. He watched Tommy struggle to read a picture book, seeing the frustration and embarrassment cloud the boy's face when he stumbled over simple words. As Rebecca spotted him and waved him over, Evans realized the magnitude of his task. He didn't just need to win his sons' hearts. He needed to resurrect himself from the dead, and he had to do it while his own body betrayed him. One failing brain cell at a time. The headache that hit him as he walked toward his family was so intense he nearly collapsed. Evans steadied himself against a park bench, forcing a smile as Rebecca watched him with growing concern. The headache felt like molten metal behind his eyes, but he couldn't let his sons see weakness. Not yet. Are you all right? Rebecca asked quietly while the boys played on the swings nearby. Just tired, Evans lied, sitting down heavily. Long day at the office. Over the following weeks, their twice-weekly meetings became a delicate dance of small progress and painful setbacks. Evans learned to plan activities around his increasing limitations. No more walking tours or physical games. Instead, He brought coloring books, simple puzzles, and picture books that Tommy could manage without frustration. Danny was the first to crack. During their fourth meeting, he approached Evans's bench with cautious curiosity. "Why do you always sit down so much?" the boy asked with typical 6-year-old directness. "These old bones get tired easily," Evans replied, grateful for an excuse that wasn't entirely false. "You're not that old," Danny observed, then surprised Evans by sitting beside him. "My friend Billy's dad is older than you, and he plays soccer with us." Evans's chest tightened. "Maybe we could read a story instead." Meanwhile, Tommy remained steadfastly distant, often hiding behind Rebecca or refusing to speak directly to Evans. His anxiety seemed to spike whenever Evans moved too quickly or when his coordination faltered, which was happening more frequently. "He's very sensitive," Rebecca explained one afternoon as Evans struggled to open a juice box with trembling fingers. "Changes upset him. New people, especially." "I understand," Evans said, though his heart ached watching Tommy retreat to the far side of the playground whenever he approached.
By the 6th week, Danny had begun calling him Mr. Evans and would occasionally share playground gossip or show off drawings from school. But Tommy continued to watch from afar, his dark eyes filled with the same weariness that haunted Rebecca's face. Evans knew time was running out. The coordination problems were becoming impossible to hide, and yesterday he'd forgotten Danny's name mid-conversation. Soon, even these precious stolen hours would be beyond his failing grasp. 3 weeks later, Rebecca called Evans with panic in her voice. "Tommy's having problems at school. There's an emergency meeting with his teacher. Would you come? He might need all the support he can get." Evans found himself in the cramped classroom of PS 215, sitting beside Rebecca on child-sized plastic chairs. His vision kept blurring, and he had to grip the tiny desk to stay focused as Mrs. Rodriguez explained the situation. "Tommy had a complete breakdown during reading time," the teacher said gently. "He threw his book across the room and hid under his desk crying. He kept saying he was too stupid and that everyone was laughing at him." Through the classroom window, Evans could see Tommy sitting alone in the principal's office, his small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The sight made his chest constrict with pain that had nothing to do with his tumor. "Where is he now?" Evans asked, struggling to stand. Rebecca noticed how he grabbed the chair for support, her brow furrowing with concern. "The counselor is with him, but he won't speak to anyone," Mrs. Rodriguez replied. Without thinking, Evans walked toward the office, his gait slightly unsteady. Rebecca followed closely, ready to catch him if he stumbled. Through the glass door, they could see Tommy curled in a ball on a beanbag chair, tears streaming down his face. Evans knocked softly and entered. "Hey, buddy." Tommy looked up, surprised to see him. "Mr. Evans? Why are you here?" "Because sometimes," Evans said, sitting carefully on the floor beside the beanbag, "people who care about each other show up when things get tough." "I can't read good," Tommy whispered, his voice breaking. "All the other kids think I'm dumb." Evans's heart shattered. "You know what? I couldn't read well when I was your age either. The letters used to dance around on the page like they were playing tricks on me." Tommy's eyes widened. "Really? Really? But you know what I learned? Being different isn't the same as being dumb. Your brain just works in a special way." For the first time since Evans had met him, Tommy scooted closer. "Did kids laugh at you too?" "Sometimes. But I had help, and you will too." When Tommy finally allowed Evans to hold him while he cried, Rebecca watched from the doorway with tears in her eyes and growing alarm at Evans's obvious confusion about which hallway led back to the parking lot. The drive home from Tommy's school was tense. Rebecca sat in the passenger seat of Evans's Mercedes, her trained eye cataloging every symptom she'd been unconsciously noting for weeks. "Pull over," she said suddenly, as Evans struggled to remember which exit led to Detroit. "I'm fine," Evans insisted, though sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool autumn air. "Evans, I work in radiology. I see brain scans every day." Her voice was clinical now, stripped of emotion. "The headaches, the coordination issues, the memory lapses, the way you grip things for balance, These aren't stress symptoms. Evans's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You're overreacting. Stop the car. Now. He pulled into a gas station, his movements jerky and uncertain. Rebecca turned to face him fully, her green eyes sharp with professional assessment. Persistent headaches, motor coordination dysfunction, episodic confusion. She rattled off in medical terminology. How long have you been experiencing neurological symptoms? Rebecca, please. How long? Her voice cut through his protest like a scalpel. Evans closed his eyes, defeated. A few months. Maybe longer. Jesus Christ. Rebecca's clinical facade cracked slightly. You've been around my children with an undiagnosed neurological condition. What if you'd had a seizure? What if you'd collapsed while holding Tommy? It's not that serious. Rebecca's training kicked in full force. Gradual onset neurological decline in a 39-year-old male points to several possibilities. None of them good. Tumor, degenerative disease, autoimmune condition. Stop, Evans whispered. You will see a neurologist within 48 hours, Rebecca declared, her voice brooking no argument. You'll get a complete workup, MRI, blood panels, everything. And until you do, you don't go near Danny and Tommy. You can't keep them from me. Watch me. Rebecca's eyes blazed with protective fury. I won't let you traumatize my sons by collapsing in front of them. Get the tests, Evans. Find out what's wrong. Then we'll talk. As she stormed out of the car, calling a cab from her phone, Evans realized his time was running out faster than he'd anticipated. Rebecca's medical instincts would eventually lead her to the truth. The question was, would she let him see his sons once she knew he was dying? 2 days later, Evans sat in the same neurologist's office where his world had first collapsed, watching Rebecca study his MRI films with the intensity of a detective examining crime scene evidence. Dr. Peterson had reluctantly agreed to include her in the consultation, given her medical background and relationship to the patient. The scans glowed against the viewing box like malevolent stars. Rebecca's face went through a spectrum of emotions: professional curiosity, growing alarm, and finally devastating comprehension. Glioblastoma multiforme, she whispered, tracing the tumor's irregular borders with her finger. Stage 4. How long has he known? Dr. Peterson glanced at Evans, who sat slumped in his chair like a condemned man. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Rebecca spun around, her eyes blazing with fury. You've known you were dying for 6 weeks, and you didn't tell me? Rebecca, please. Please nothing. Her voice cracked like a whip. I've been letting you spend time with my children while you've been lying to my face about having terminal brain cancer. Evans tried to stand, but his coordination betrayed him, and he nearly fell back into the chair. I just wanted time with them. You needed to manipulate me. Rebecca's professional composure shattered completely. 6 to 8 weeks prognosis. That means you have maybe 2 weeks left, doesn't it, Dr. Peterson? The neurologist nodded grimly. The tumor has grown significantly since the initial diagnosis. We're looking at days to weeks now. Rebecca pressed her hands against her temples, pacing the small office like a caged animal. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. You let me think you were just stressed or overworked while your brain was literally dying. I was terrified you'd cut me off completely, Evans admitted, his voice barely audible. I've already lost 7 years with them. I couldn't lose what little time I had left. Rebecca stopped pacing, her chest heaving with emotion. For a long moment, she stared at the man who had once destroyed her life and was now dying in front of her eyes. If you want any remaining time with Danny and Tommy, she said finally, her voice deadly calm, you will never lie to me again about anything. I decide how we handle this with the boys. I decide when we tell them. And I decide how much time you get. Understood?
Evans nodded desperately. Understood. And Evans, Rebecca's green eyes were filled with tears she refused to shed. I'm sorry you're dying, but I will not let you destroy my children the way you destroyed me. Rebecca's new rules were strict as military protocol. Visits were reduced to 1 hour, twice a week, always in her apartment where Evans could rest if needed. No more park meetings. His balance had become too unreliable. "Boys," Rebecca announced on their first supervised indoor visit. "Evans is going to spend some quiet time with you. He's been feeling sick lately, so we need to keep activities calm." Danny, now 8 weeks into knowing Evans, had developed a protective streak. "Are you going to be okay, Evans' daddy?" he asked. The hybrid title slipped out naturally. Evans's heart nearly stopped. "Evans' daddy? Is that okay?" Danny asked uncertainly. "You're not like a regular daddy, but you're not just Evans either." "It's perfect," Evans whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Tommy remained curled in the corner with his picture books, stealing glances but maintaining his distance. The boy's anxiety seemed to spike whenever Evans moved too slowly or paused mid-sentence, which was happening more frequently. Evans had adapted their activities around his limitations. Board games replaced physical play. Reading together replaced walks. He'd set up a small video camera in the corner, Rebecca's permission granted after he'd explained his purpose. "Danny, can you look at the camera for a minute?" Evans asked during their third visit. "Why?" "I want to record some messages for you. For when you're older. Like when you graduate high school, or get married, or have kids of your own." Danny frowned with 6-year-old logic. "Can't you just tell me then?" Rebecca intervened gently. "Evans wants to make sure his words are saved forever, sweetie." Between visits, Evans spent his remaining energy writing detailed letters for each boy. Instructions for Danny about being a big brother. Encouragement for Tommy about his reading struggles. Stories about the Keating family history they'd never learned. During their fourth visit, Evans's speech began slurring slightly. Danny noticed immediately. "Evans' daddy, you sound funny. Sometimes my mouth doesn't work as well as it used to," Evans explained simply. "Like Tommy with reading." "Exactly like that." From his corner, Tommy looked up for the first time that day, a flicker of understanding crossing his young face. The following Tuesday brought unexpected rain, trapping them all inside Rebecca's small living room. Evans sat at the kitchen table, his movements now noticeably slower and more deliberate. The tumor was progressing rapidly. His speech had become more labored, and his left hand trembled almost constantly. "I brought something special today," Evans announced, pulling out a large box of art supplies from his bag with Rebecca's help. Danny immediately rushed over, but Tommy remained on the couch, clutching his worn stuffed elephant. Over the past weeks, the boy had begun stealing longer glances at Evans, his curiosity clearly warring with his anxiety. "These are professional artist pencils," Evans explained to Danny, his words slightly slurred but understandable. "The kind real artists use." "Can I try them?" Danny asked eagerly. "Of course. That's why I brought them." As Danny began sketching enthusiastically, Evans noticed Tommy had crept closer, his dark eyes fixed on the colored pencils with unmistakable longing. "Tommy," Evans said softly, "would you like to draw something?" The boy shook his head quickly, but didn't retreat to the couch. "You know," Evans continued, his voice patient despite the effort speech required, "when I was your age, I loved to draw. My hands worked better with pictures than with words." Tommy's grip on his elephant loosened slightly. "Really? Really? Words were hard for me too, but pictures made sense." Rebecca watched from the kitchen doorway, ready to intervene if needed, but something in Evans's tone kept her silent. "I can't draw good," Tommy whispered, moving another step closer. "I bet you can," Evans said, sliding a fresh sheet of paper across the table. "Wanna try together?" For the first time in 2 months, Tommy approached Evans willingly. He climbed onto the chair beside him, his small body radiating nervous energy. "What should we draw?" Evans asked. "I don't know," Tommy said, picking up a green pencil with careful reverence. "How about a tree? Everyone can draw a tree." As they worked side by side, Evans's trembling hand guided Tommy's steady one. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the gentle scratch of pencils on paper and the rain against the windows. "Evans," Tommy said suddenly, not looking up from his drawing. "Yes, buddy. Mommy told us our daddy died before we were born." Evans's pencil stopped moving. Rebecca tensed in the doorway, but Evans caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. "That's what she told you?" Evans confirmed carefully. Tommy's voice was thoughtful, not accusatory. "But you're here now. Did you come back from heaven?" The innocent question hit Evans like a physical blow. He glanced at Rebecca, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Permission to navigate this minefield himself. "Tommy," Evans said slowly, choosing his words with the precision of a surgeon, "sometimes grown-ups make very bad mistakes. Sometimes they hurt the people they love so badly that they have to go away. Like a timeout, sort of, but a very long timeout." Tommy continued coloring, processing this information with 6-year-old logic. "Were you in timeout because you hurt Mommy?" "Yes," Evans whispered. "I hurt your mommy very, very badly, and I've been sorry about it every single day since. But you came back." "I came back because I wanted to meet you and Danny. Because even though I made terrible mistakes, I never stopped loving you." Tommy set down his pencil and looked directly at Evans for the first time. "Do you love us even though we didn't know you?" Evans's vision blurred with tears he fought to control. "I love you both more than all the stars in the sky. More than I ever knew it was possible to love anyone. Even though I can't read good? Especially because you're exactly perfect the way you are." Tommy studied Evans's face with the intensity only children possessed. "Are you going to have to go back to heaven soon?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Evans looked at Rebecca, who had tears streaming down her face, then back at his son. "I might have to," Evans admitted. "But before I do, I want you to know something very important. Are you listening?" Tommy nodded solemnly. "You are smart and kind and brave. You are going to do amazing things in your life. And even if I can't be here to see them all, I will always, always be proud of you." For a moment, they sat in complete silence. Then, to everyone's amazement, Tommy slowly scooted his chair closer to Evans. "Can I have a hug?" the boy asked quietly. Evans's heart nearly exploded with joy and grief. "I would love that more than anything." When Tommy's small arms wrapped around his neck, Evans felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. For the first time since his diagnosis, he wasn't thinking about death or lost time or regrets. He was simply a father holding his son, complete in that perfect moment. The final weeks passed like pages torn from a calendar. Evans's condition deteriorated rapidly. His coordination failed, his speech became labored, and soon he needed a wheelchair to visit his sons. But Rebecca, perhaps understanding that time was the only gift left to give, allowed him to see the boys as often as his failing health permitted. On their last visit together, Evans sat in his wheelchair in Rebecca's living room, surrounded by drawings the boys had made for him. Danny held his right hand while Tommy colored beside his left arm, both children having accepted that their Evans daddy was going to heaven soon. "Tell us about when you were little," Danny requested, squeezing Evans's fingers gently. Evans's voice grew softer as he shared fragmented memories. Climbing trees in Grant Park, building forts with couch cushions, the way his grandmother made pancakes shaped like animals. Simple stories that painted pictures of a childhood both boys could connect with. "Did you have trouble reading too?" Tommy asked, looking up from his drawing. "Yes. Letters would jump around the page like they were playing hide and seek. But you got better? I got different. Found my own way. You will too." As the afternoon wore on, Evans's periods of consciousness grew shorter, but each time he opened his eyes, his gaze sought his son's. Danny had appointed himself official handholder, maintaining gentle contact even when Evans dozed. Tommy had created an elaborate artwork featuring stick figures labeled Daddy, Mommy, Danny, and Tommy standing under a rainbow. "Look," Tommy said softly during one of Evans's alert moments. "It's our family." Evans studied the drawing with fierce concentration, memorizing every crayon stroke. "It's perfect," he managed. "You're all perfect." That evening, as visiting hours ended, saying goodbye felt different, more final. Danny seemed to understand this instinctively. "Evan's daddy," Danny said, leaning close to the wheelchair. "I love you. I love you too, Danny. So much." Tommy, emboldened by his brother's example, climbed carefully onto Evans's lap for one last hug. "I love you, Evan's daddy. Will you watch me from heaven? Every single day," Evans promised, his voice breaking. "Every single day." Evans Keating died peacefully in his sleep 3 days later, surrounded by flowers from his sons and photos they'd drawn for him. His last conscious thought had been of 2 little boys calling him Evan's daddy, and the woman who had given him the greatest gift of all, a chance at redemption.